Good morning. Welcome. Welcome to day 2 of CHI 2007, our 25th anniversary. I'm very pleased to be here. And on behalf of Mary Beth Rawson and David Gilmore, I want to re-welcome you to CHI 2007. I'm delighted to report that we have well over 2,600 registrations, and the number continues to grow over these days. That's great news. It does mean we have the success problem, that some of the sessions are crowded. So please take care to get to the sessions you want to early. Please take your seats up front, fill in all those seats, and allow for room in the back for people to come and sit and participate in the session so everybody can enjoy the session that they really want to get to. Also, please pay attention and give thanks. Every time you see a smiling student volunteer, smile back, thank them for their good assistance, and listen to their directions. Sometimes they have the difficult task of having to steer you away from a session that's pretty busy. So please work with them and listen to them and appreciate them. We have a great group, and it's always a pleasure to see them and have them participate. I'm running the session this morning, the first on the Social Impact Award. There'll be 2 sessions. As you know, this year the awards committee has given 2 awards to Gary Marsden and Gregory Aboud. I'll hope you'll come to both of those discussions. And so I have the chance to tell a little bit about the 25-year aspirations for the CHI. Could I have my slides up? Oh, we missed that. Could we have my slides up on the screen somewhere? My slides, not Gary's slides. Slides from the other projector. There we go. All right, Gary Marsden and Gregory Aboud. That's the names to remember. I'm very pleased that they both received the award. This is the 3rd year the Social Impact Award has been given. When Bill Curtis, myself, and many other people initiated the original conference in Gaithersburg in 1982, we had many aspirations. Among them were to promote academic research and education in the field, particularly in fields such as computer science, psychology, business, and beyond. We also were very much aware, and we were very pleased to have active participation of leading companies, and as we promoted the practice and the training about user experience, usability testing within corporations, government. But at that time, I think all of us involved had a certain sense of commitment, a certain passion for this venture, because we felt that we were out to shape technology and its usage in such a way that it would raise the quality of life. We had that aspiration. We had a vision of what we wanted to do. And in these 25 years, there's a lot of satisfactions for me in how this discipline has grown, it's spread, it's successfully as an academic discipline with dozens of conferences and dozens of journals and presence in most university campuses. I'm pleased that it's a growing force in companies and in government agencies. But in a sense, I think there's still more work to be done. And that's been the theme. As I followed the years and I looked at the proceedings of the CHI conference, I found many wonderful innovations, innovative input devices, innovative display strategies, innovative applications. But I became concerned that some of the issues that we had thought about and raised were not getting the kind of attention that we wanted to see. And so a few years ago, with the help of the CHI leadership, particularly Mary Cherwinski, we discussed the idea of a social impact award and the description of the things that we wanted to promote, and I was pleased to initiate it and provide some funding, but CHI has picked it up in a very good way. And so there were many, many other issues that I think were important, such as medical care, housing, water supply, and nutrition in developing countries. We wanted to understand how we could really focus directly on improving educational opportunities worldwide. We recognize the importance of addressing diverse populations. And again, this community has done well in some of these aspects. And so the idea was to celebrate the work that had been done and to encourage further work in this direction. And we see this as part of an international effort. I wonder how many of you really know about the United Nations Millennium Development Goals, which were promulgated 5 years ago to, by the year 2015, accomplish these 8 ambitious goals of eradicating extreme poverty and hunger, achieve universal primary education, and so on, reduce child mortality. You can see them there. I hope you'll visit their webpage, which you can see is properly in the 5 different languages of the United Nations, or 6, I guess now. We know that HCI on its own can't solve these problems, but in partnership with other disciplines, we have a role to play. And so it's that quest and that dream, that vision, that this Social Impact Award is committed to making happen. I'm pleased that at this conference we can look for aspects of these themes that are being worked on. On Saturday, the workshop on User-Centered Design for Development, UCD4D, brought together some 40 people. And Susan Dray, who has always been a hero in this topic and promoting international development, was among the leaders, but many others came to join her, and this is a theme that I would love to see grow within the CHI community. The design competition, again, wonderful good news here. 54 teams from around the world contributed solutions to the problem that was put forward. 12 of them were brought here to San Jose. You can see their posters in the hallway. Visit them, take a look at what these capable students have done, and come to the session in which the final 4 will get to present their work, and the award will be given for the best efforts in that direction. Additionally, take a look at your program. Look at it. Think about what's important. As I did that, and I'm sure there are other sessions also having great importance, but these are ones that I wanted to mention to you and steer your attention to. The session on sustainability and interaction, Jen Mankoff has become a leader in that area, and bravo to her and others. The session on politics and activism deals with voting. This is a topic we should be the leaders for, and yet those in the software engineering communities and the security area have grabbed the attention nationally and internationally. But it is an HCI issue for the design of proper voting systems. We should be the leader. We should be talking about those topics. I'm pleased that there's a small session on medical interfaces. We should be much bigger in that area. The world of medical informatics is a huge topic, and the growing interest in electronic patient records is a vital topic. There are, in the US, an estimated 98,000 deaths from medical errors, many of which could be changed by a proper redesign of user interfaces. There is a session about education and culture that speaks to these issues, and one about emergency action that responds to concerns in many countries about the kind of conditions that Katrina or September 11th disasters might provoke. We need to be more engaged and leaders for that topic. We need to claim that space by the work that we do, by the influence we have. Finally, the second Social Impact Award, Gregory Aboud for his work on using technologies to face autism, and I hope you'll attend the closing plenary about the mobile as post-industrial platform for socioeconomic development. So there's good things to look at, and I wanted to, by this effort, steer your attention and make sure that you shifted your attention, you shifted the attention of your colleagues and your students to think about the ways in which our field would become a leader for these important themes. And so I'm pleased to come to introducing Gary Marsden from University of Cape Town. He has a Ph.D. in computer science from Stirling in Scotland from 1998, and then he went to South Africa, where at the University of Cape Town, he's in the computer science department. I had the pleasure to visit him there a little more than a year ago, and was inspired by what I saw that he was doing and how he was inspiring his students. He inspires us every issue of ACM Interactions with his section called Under Development. And his recent book, Mobile Interaction Design with Matt Jones, who's sitting here in the front, is available at the Wiley Book booth in the exhibits area. So it's with great pleasure that I invite Gary to come on stage, and I invite you to listen seriously, intently, and thoughtfully to what he has to say about how we as a community can shift attention and increase the social impact of our work. Thank you. Gary?
Thanks, Ben. Good morning. Wow, thank you all for coming after the free alcohol last night. It's very kind. My name is Gary Marsden, as Ben said. I work in the computer science department at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. And what I want to talk to you about today, no, it's all gone blue, is doing HCI differently. Why it is slightly different to do HCI in the developing world. So, why am I here? A good existentialist question for early in the morning. And as Ben said, it's because this year I was fortunate enough to be recognized by the CHI committee for my contributions. And this is kind of scary if you live in Africa, because Africa's far away. Let me just show you how far it is. If we were to leave San Jose and fly for a long time in economy class to London, that was 8 time zones. And then you changed airport and you got back in a plane and flew over Europe, through North Africa, over the Sahara, through Central Africa. Eventually, you would get to Cape Town, where I live. It is the southwesternmost corner of Africa. And if you look, this is the city, this is Table Mountain. Some of you may know Table Mountain. And this is our university campus, which is just on the mountain. So when you live in Africa, you don't expect anyone to pay attention to what you're doing. And I'm really encouraged and excited by the fact that these issues are becoming so important to the CHI community. It's fantastic. And I just really like to thank the committee and those involved for recognizing not just my work, but the work of the people in Africa in this way. By this point, some of you will notice that I do not really have an African accent. And so I am from Ireland originally. I did my Ph.D. in 1999. I moved to Africa in 1999, very enthusiastic in a way that only a naive Ph.D. student can be. You know, I'd learned everything I knew HCI. And that is a large part to play, I think, in why I have a unique perspective on what's going on in Africa. So no one ever tells you why you win these awards. You know, it's like, here's an award, well done, go away. And I think from the comments that I got when I spoke to people, it's maybe for 2 reasons, which I want to share with you today. And maybe I can inspire you. The first of which is, when I went with my naive ideas, I discovered they didn't work. A lot of them just don't work, and I'll talk about that a little bit. And so we're going to talk a bit about Africa, the users, HCI methodologies, and then hopefully show you some inspiring case studies. And then the second reason is, when I went to Africa, I found amazing people doing absolutely amazing and inspiring work that no one in the rest of the world knew about. So since moving there, it has been my passion to let other people know about this, hence the column, hence coming to CHI to tell people what's going on there. And so I really want to give thanks. I'm going to show you some stuff today, and almost none of it is mine. It's all done by other people. And all I've really been able to do is help them plug into the CHI community a bit and draw from the research that's done here. So colleagues, my students, people in the SA community are doing great work. But then also the international community. For a lot of you have come to visit me, which is jolly nice. Susan, Ben, Jenny, Elizabeth, all those people up there have been and contributed. And so now as people have found out about the developing world and contributing, we're all a lot more positive. So, if I was to say to you, Africa, what is the first image that jumps into your mind? What are the words that come to your mind? What do you feel? Well, obviously I can't ask all of you individually, it would take all day. So I figured that Google is our collective unconscious. So I went to Google and I typed in Africa, and here's what I got. Africa is in crisis. We've got orphans, hang on, let me just turn this off. We've got poverty, we've got orphans, we've got hunger, we need volunteers, we've got a little culture, that's good. We've got AIDS, and we need help. Africa is a disaster. Why on earth would anyone go there? Why would you want to be involved with a place like this? And if this is all you read, you would never go. But it's not really like that. Sure, that stuff goes on, but that's not the whole story. And when I got there, I have never laughed as much as I have living in Africa. There's such joy. And also, you know, as a person who's interested in engineering and technology and design, there are some astounding things. This is a Unix bicycle, an open source bicycle. Who knew? And here is the guy who has hacked his bicycle. Right, so this is the guy who delivers eggs in a village called Munilunga, which is on the border of Zambia, Congo, and Angola. Go look it up. And he has hacked his bicycle. You can see he got some friends on the mine to get him this reinforcing rod. And this bike will now carry 75 kilos of eggs. He's got this bit of rubber to tie them down, and he's upgraded his suspension. He has pimped his ride. He's put the bits of wood in so the seat can take greater weight. And this is all this guy owns. He doesn't have a house, he doesn't have a garage. But he's been able to use the technology he's got. He's got this great design ingenuity, design flair, and he's able to turn his bicycle into something that works for his life. And so I would like to say there is hope. If you give these guys just a few resources, they have nothing. They can make a lot with them. So what about digital technology? When I went to the University of Cape Town, UCT, I started working with the Centre for Higher Education Development there. And they were trying to build software to help for education, you know, help replace teachers. There aren't enough teachers in South Africa. And they were looking at first-year students who came into the university. How can we help these students? And a very nice person there called Marion came to me one day and said, Gary, I've got a real problem. No one can use my interface. And I said, well, can you show it to me? He says, well, I've reduced it down, and I've got to the point where I think I can get it no smaller, but people still can't use it. And she got it to this point where people were confused by a button. So, having got my Ph.D. in HCI, I thought, aha, let me get out my Hofstadter. Right? I've got my cultural dimensions. I will look up and see what happens in South Africa. So I don't know if you can see this. This is South Africa in the bottom, and I read along, and I discover that South Africans don't like uncertainty. They avoid uncertainty. But then what does that mean? You know, it's fine to write an exam on this stuff. What does that mean? Does it mean I can do this? Does that avoid uncertainty? No, of course not. That's nonsense. So I had to give up on Hofstadter. That didn't work. And then I thought, oh, universal usability, universal access. I will translate the interface into the native language. And for those of you who don't know, most of our students speak a language called Xhosa. It's one of the click languages. So button in Xhosa is ikosha. Apologies for pronunciation. And one of Marion's students eventually said, look, she said, click on the button. And he said, there is no button. And Marion said, there's the button. And he said, that is not a button. That is a picture of a button. Which was kind of Magritte's point. So, you know, French philosophy in Africa. But the serious point here is there's a different literacy at work. It's not enough to translate the interface. There are deeper literacies that I didn't understand at the time. I mean, maybe some of you do, but in the literature, this is not well reported. And working with Marion, we discovered that because we live in the West and we have good publishing, we often equate the picture of a thing to the thing. But if you've never seen a magazine, why would you do that? We hit other problems with new interfaces we tried to create using hierarchies, hierarchical menus. And we discovered that the students were really struggling, so we took some of them and we told them about family trees and explained, you know, how it branches out, and because we thought they could relate to that. And then we got them to draw some family trees. This is what we got. Now, we tried this with many people and many different ways of teaching hierarchies, and it didn't work out. And so it's not enough to translate, for example, the menus on a cell phone into the local language if the local people have no concept of what a hierarchy is. But it cuts both ways. This is a shop in Zambia. And I stood looking at the shop going, what? I thought it looked like a cartoon. I thought there was some kind of story going on here. And then I realized after a little while, actually, this is a shop selling things for people who work on the mine and who cannot read or write. And the shop is advertising what products are for sale. And this left to right layout made me think of a cartoon, and I was applying the wrong visual literacy to the situation. So there are quite big differences. So if I'm giving up on Hofstadter and I'm kind of saying, well, there are more issues here than just translating interfaces, what can we do? User-centered design. Cannot go wrong with user-centered design, can you? Well, it's never straightforward. First thing is, papers and computers are different things. But when you get someone to do a paper prototyping session, everyone understands actually that this is just a prototype and you can write software and it will be made into an actual product or a solution. People who've never used computers, we find that for a lot of them that is too big a jump to make. They cannot abstract enough. They don't understand the technology well enough. And that also shows up in the mutability of software. Right? Anyone who can program knows it's easy to move buttons around. Right? If you want that button, we can have new buttons. That's not a problem. But when you're doing these kind of participatory design sessions with people, they say, well, can you not put a button on the cell phone, on the outside? You know, you can put buttons on the screen. Why not have one on the outside? And for them, you know, it's hard to explain that I cannot phone up Nokia and order 60,000 phones with this special button on the screen. But I can put a button on the screen. And so these assumptions that you can just rush into doing prototyping and so on, you have to rethink what you're doing. And then finally, the other linchpin, iterative design. This is a shot, I'm sorry, it doesn't come out very well, of a project in a clinic that some colleagues, Bill Tucker, Andrew Monder, and Marsden worked on with me. They built some software for nurses who'd never seen a computer before. And it took about 6 months training for those nurses to be able to learn how to use the mouse and the keyboard and the software. And then, as designers, we get some data about how to change the interface, how to make it better. But the nurse is like, no, don't change a thing. We've just spent 6 months learning this design. For goodness sake, do not change it. And so what we have to do is we took all the learnings from this, and then we went to the next clinic up the road, and we iterate physically. We iterate spatially, not temporally. So what do we do? Right. The things that work best for us tend to be very deep, ethnographic action research. We do a lot of critical action research, participatory action research. I'll not go into those now. That medical project that you saw, it took about 3 years before we got any interesting data from it. So there are 3 years spent just building a relationship. And then I was at the workshop on Saturday about the UCD for development, and we discovered a problem that all of us has is it's not human-computer interaction, it's really community-computer interaction. When you go, you have to engage the whole community because it is such a fundamental shift. You can't affect one person without affecting the village or the clinic or whatever. And so to help with that, we work with an NGO called bridges.org. These are some of their criteria for doing projects in the developing world. And some of them, I'll not go through them all. Interesting ones are things like technology trust. Do people trust the technology? People in Africa are scared of the internet. It's very chaotic. No one's in charge. We've got enough chaos with no one in charge in Africa already. We don't really need more. Whereas cell phones are sold by a company that they put a lot of effort into building trust and building a brand. People trust that. Other things, just to pick up on one other, does the technology integrate into a routine? In other words, if you build a telecenter and people have to walk 5 miles to the telecenter, that's not going to work. Or is the technology going to be located in their homes? So there are all these checklists that we've developed with Bridges to try and understand if a higher intervention is going, if it's worth doing, how to assess it, all those sorts of things. So it's not that HCI is wrong, per se. We just need to kind of extend out in a few more directions. And then finally, just the ethics of doing this research. The problems you encounter, I just never thought of. How do you explain to someone who lives in the middle of the bush what a university is? Hello, I am from a university. No. I'm doing a research, no. I am a teacher. Oh. I said, but what are the ethics of that? You know, you're there with the best of intentions, but how do you represent what it is you're doing? And most of my work is done by students who run on a 3-year period. They go, they do some research, and after 3 years, they're gone. But after making such a massive intervention into that community, is that right? Obviously not. So when you start a research project, you have to have a very clear sustainability or exit strategy marked down. And also, 2 of my students are in the audience, so I hope they don't tell the other students this, but I feel bad about the load that I put on them. One of them got arrested for being white, basically, in this area. And he also got caught in floods and his car got washed off a bridge way out in remote Africa. I mean, this doesn't happen to most grad students. So maybe this is good fuel for you guys. You can go, oh, if you're naughty, I'll send you to the University of Cape Town. So not only are they trying to do the research, they've also got this huge problem of managing communities, getting washed away in floods, but it's much more interesting. Okay, so I've talked a little about the people. What about the technology? What percentage of the population of South Africa do you think have access to the internet? Not bad, it's 12. 12%. What percentage have landlines? Slightly less. So obviously internet cafes are doing well. About 10%. So 10% of people in South Africa have a landline. Here's one that's close to my heart. What percentage of South Africans pay income tax? In other words, what percentage of our population earn enough that the government thinks they're economically interesting to go after? 11%. It's only 11% of people pay income tax. So against that backdrop, what percentage do you think of cellular handsets? 77% of the population. And these facts I took from the CIA fact book. If you can't trust the CIA, who can you trust? So, as a consequence, most of our research is looking at cellular handsets. I mean, it's a no-brainer. PCs are the wrong technology for Africa. I think we're going to just miss that out and move on to cell phones. Why are they so successful? Well, wireless devices don't rely on wires. If you need something to plug into a wire, that assumes that you have a home that the wire can go to and a desk on which you can set something to plug into the wire. And for most of the population, that's not true. There's a lot of itinerant working. They move around a lot. Cell phones solve this problem. We can go for days without electricity. Cell phones can as well. They're pretty robust. You can get them dusty, certainly more so than PCs. And they're cheap. They're subsidized by the networks. So to get access to hardware, that is the best way to go. So most of our research now is focused around building applications and devices that rely on a cell phone platform. So we can assume, so when we build something, this is our design space. We assume they do not have a PC. Now that is really important because most people in this room who have a cell phone will also have a PC. If you take photos on your camera phone, you will download them onto your PC. If you listen to music on your phone or your iPod, you will have a PC that gets music for you, or you store music, or you manage music and photos. People in Africa who have camera phones and MP3 phones, they don't have that infrastructure, just the one device. Now, how does that affect your usage of the device? So we assume that people have a handset. We don't give ourselves the luxury of designing physical handsets for Africa. I think that's a problem, but I don't want to get into that now. And it sounds terribly limiting, right? What can you do with just a standard cell phone? What kind of interactive solutions can you build to improve people's lives? And it sounds kind of boring, but it's not. And it's the same argument I've heard used in the universal usability community, that solutions that work there also work for non-disabled users. Predictive text came out of universal usability, helping people with restricted motor movement. But all of us, I assume, use predictive text. So let me give you some case studies. And this is a guy I met in Zambia. That's the Zambezi River behind me. And he has a camera phone. And I chatted to him about his life. And after a little time, he brought out his camera phone and showed me some of the photos he had on it. And he showed me how he built his house. And he had a very exact presentation worked out. This was his PowerPoint. So look, here is my house. Next slide. Here is how I built the foundation. Okay. And so the phone became a very essential part of him, and he wanted to share those photos with us. And so that got me to thinking about, well, what would happen if you had no PC? What if you had to put 4,000 or 5,000 photographs on a device? And I had one student work on this, a guy from Zambia, as it turned out, and he built this great system for browsing thousands of photographs on a cell phone or PDA. It works really well. But then the next thing would be, well, we saw guys handing around their phones. Now, if you and I want to share a photograph, we stick it on Flickr or Facebook or Picasa, whatever. Or we get our laptop out and spin it around. Look, here I am in San Jose having fun. Or not. And you're all looking pretty awake, thank you. But could we not build an application, if we've no laptop and no Flickr, could we not build an application that would broadcast our photographs onto other handheld devices? Because everyone has a handheld device. And so what you're seeing here are 3 different screens. We do all our prototyping on PDAs, but this will also run on a cell phone. And what's happening is that the one person, he's explaining how he went bungee jumping, and as he moves the photograph. But what's crucial is any person, so he's showing you this now, can contribute to the discussion. You can draw on your screen. It's all kind of equal opportunity. Everybody's drawing. And as I said, we only came up with this solution because no one has Flickr. But what was fascinating is in the user tests, we set up an experiment where we had 3 friends. We'd sponsor them to go out for the day, and they'd come back and tell a 4th friend what they did to try and get some storytelling going. At the end of the session, they would not give us back the PDAs. They would not stop the evaluation, go, this is great. They're having a real ball. And so I think that's a pretty good indication this is a nice system. But the point I'm trying to make is we wouldn't have got there if we had all these other technologies around us. And so we're going to, next stage will be to trial this with other people. One of the nicest projects I came across, I did a little bit of work on this, but it's mostly one of my colleagues, Edwin Blake, is helping trackers in the Kalahari. Now, trackers are descendants of sand bushmen who are just unbelievable at tracking animals through forest. They'll come along, they'll see a little stick, and they'll go, ooh. And you go, what? That's a stick. And you go, no. A giraffe with a sore foot came past here 20 minutes ago, and it was thinking about the sky. Okay. And you go round the corner, and there's a giraffe. These guys are phenomenal. The problem was, they're not literate. You go, hang on, they can read grass. They are fluent in grass. But they're not fluent in English or Afrikaans, and so they couldn't communicate what they were doing or the observations they made to the park rangers, and this was a problem. And so Edwin got involved and did a couple of years with these guys, ethnographic studies, the stuff I've talked about. And he reasoned that, well, they're good at interpreting symbols like footprints, so he built a completely iconic interface. And so these guys can press the symbols, and once it was presented to them in this way, again, these guys couldn't deal with hierarchies, we had to make flat lists, that whole story, but they were able to communicate. And the amazing thing is, at the end of the project, one of them said to Edwin, "I love this thing. It makes me clever." Now, that's a strange thing to say. And so when Edwin pushed him a little, he said, well, it basically comes down to the fact that finally, these racist game rangers can understand that I have knowledge that they could not see before, and they now treat me differently. And I thought that was a great result for an HCI project. Final project I want to tell you about is a charity that I do a little work with called Cell Life. The goal of Cell Life is to monitor adherence to antiretroviral drugs in patients. I don't know how much of you guys know about antiretrovirals, but they're pretty complicated to take. And if you miss one, that's really bad. You need to adhere to the program pretty rigorously. And if you're not literate and so on, it's complicated. So the system we have in Africa, or in South Africa, is we have health workers who are HIV positive, go out and visit people who are on ARV drugs, and they make sure they adhere to the requirements. Now, the problem is, how do you get that data back to the doctors? Again, many of these people are semi-literate. But one of the people in the charity noticed that all the nurses could SMS. And so she contacted one of my students now, and he built an application that you can install on the SIM card, that when the nurse went to visit the patient, she filled out the questions that were stored in this little SIM application, hit send, the information was sent to the doctor, and the doctor posted the ARV drugs straight to the guy's house. But here's the fascinating thing. Because the technology was installed on something that the nurses owned, they became zealous about it. If you spoke to one of these women, you needed to have about an hour and a half free, because they would sit you down, look, this is very good, you should have one of these, and go through it. And they were so excited about the potential, because before, when it was laptops or paper, that was owned by someone else. When it's on their phone, they don't feel intimidated by it. It's technology they're familiar with, and they really got plugged into it. So I'm just going to wrap up now. What I hope you got out of my talk is that Africa is interesting. Yes, there are terrible things, but also there's a lot of hope, and there's a lot of ingenuity, and there's a lot of great design. And cell phones are now meaning that people are starting to get engaged in digital media and the digital revolution. And so the theme of this conference is reaching beyond, and I'm delighted that the Chi community is now starting to do that. It's fantastic. And I think you should be proud. I mean, this is going to sound a little corny, but it's true nevertheless. Working in Africa, you see people come and donate equipment, or governments come and do stuff, and they build a telecenter. I won't say which company did this, but they built several telecenters. And no one uses them, because you've got to walk for a day to get there. And what are you going to do when you're there? It's pointless. But there are all these people who are doing HCI, who are heavily engaged, and making those small investments count for a lot more. There's a lot of good being done by HCI people out there in the world. There's still a lot more to do. That can't be good. As I said, the methodologies, most of my research time is spent now answering email, but worrying about kind of reducing user-centered design back to a point and building it up again in a way that is appropriate for Africa. As I said, it's not really user-centered design with us, it's community-centered design. That's a little different. It's kind of fun working it out. So if you're bored and looking for research areas, I would really encourage you to get involved. A couple of ways you could do that. As Ben said, I added a column in Interactions, and well, it's every 2 months, we get someone from the developing world talking about the work that they're doing and why it is different to do HCI and some of the exciting challenges they have. So if you'd like to read that, if you're working in doing development projects, and it doesn't even need to be Africa, you know, there are places around the world less fortunate. If you have some story you want to tell the world about how your HCI is different and is doing development, then please email me. And also the last chapter in the book that Matt and I wrote is really a call to arms. I go into more detail about these projects I've shown you, about the methodologies, about the real access criteria. If you're interested, that's probably a good place to start. Better still, you could come visit us. The DIS conference will be in Cape Town next year. Now this is important because if you're going to travel all the way to Cape Town, that'd be nice, but we're trying to make it worth your while. We've hooked up with the Design Indaba conference. Indaba is an African word meaning meeting or discussion. And so what will happen is that there'll be 2 days of DIS, where we talk about interactive systems, and then for 3 days, the Indaba will run, and that is every designer in Africa comes to this conference. And they present fashion design, product design, graphic design. So if you're interested in Tull and what's happening in design in the rest of the world, this may be a good thing to come to. And I'll send you the call for papers next week. And that is all I want to say. Thank you.
Very good. In a calm and very strong way. Very lovely. Bravo, bravo.
Bravo. I think it's great. Just really an inspirational story. And one that has substance and content for all of us. As I got through the questions, I was kind of charmed by a few of the directions. So let me just start with the easy ones. There was a great sense of interest about you and how this really works. So the really first simple question is very personal. Why did you move to Africa?
There's a glib answer, which is I was working with Matt in London. And we were both in an office with no windows. And one day I cracked, I said, that's it. And I opened communications of the ICM, and I thought, right, the first sunny job, I'm going to apply for it. And so that was, okay, I'd been to Africa before, but that was the level of my connection. And I went on a 2-year contract, and that was 8 years ago. Okay, so I got hooked. It's fascinating, it's inspiring. I didn't set out, on a crusade. It's just interesting. It's a real privilege, actually. I do feel privileged to work there.
I'd like to add to that. When I visited, it's just an inspiring place because while he showed some of the more primitive and difficult conditions, Cape Town is a thriving modern city with beautiful gardens, beautiful places to visit, charming guest houses to stay, and a rich, fascinating culture and community. When I visited with Paula and in Pretoria and Johannesburg, you find there are thriving cities there. It's a country of 40 million that is united in the last 10 years in a sense of they're building a country. They have economic resources. There's a unity that is inspiring, and I think you will be inspired as well. The continuing questions then, how do you get funding for your work? And the good side of it is, how could we help you?
Yeah.
So where does the resources come, and what do you need to make it go? And what are the things you'd like from this community, the companies they represent, and the sponsors?
Okay, 2 things. Our government is very good about giving us funding. All the government money I get, though, I try and plow back into social projects that are relevant to society, obviously. Mm-hmm. In terms of contributing, you can sponsor DIS. We're massively under budget, but that's a whole other story. I guess if you are interested, if you're a corporation who wants to donate to Africa, please make sure there's someone locally involved. It's heartbreaking to see the money that is spent to no good end, because it's easier to spend it that way. So involve HCI people, come and speak to me, and I can hook you up with relevant people in whatever country.
Would you like to be a little more specific? Are there particular organizations that are technology focused? You mentioned bridges.org, which is, I think, an admirable group. Do you want to encourage support for them? Their webpage will tell you interesting stories, but are other groups like that people could connect with?
Not really, sadly.
All right.
They were unique in that respect.
And the United Nations Development Organization does have efforts of technology support. Has that been a helpful bridge for you?
United Nations moves very slowly. They're a long-term engagement.
All right. I think I'll stop there, right? I guess people felt an inspiring talk, and that's good news, and I hope you'll come up and take it further with Gary. The largest bunch of questions, a whole handful here, are asking for a little more deeper discussion about the $100 laptop proposal and what your vision was, whether that was appropriately defined, and what could help to make that a success story.
The $100 laptop, I'm delighted that it's happening. It's raised a lot of press. That's fantastic. It's solving a problem that I haven't come across in my research, because our population has cell phones. The $100 cell phone, that would be more appropriate for South Africa. So I haven't ever seen one of these devices, so I don't really feel I can comment. I'm delighted that it's happening, but I'm not sure it would be the ideal solution for the places that I work.
I sort of want to elicit more from you about that. That design, it's not just the technology, but the idea of making it very widespread, that the countries that are to join are to provide every student with this technology. And do you think that those would be the dominant things that would help education, healthcare, or are there alternative technologies you would promote?
I mean, hand on heart, I would, the thing that's bothering us most, we don't have enough teachers to teach with the laptops. I mean, like I said, I haven't seen the software. If the software is good enough that you don't need teachers, then fantastic, but I've yet to see software like that. So I would, look, I don't want to get into this.
All right. Well, I guess,
teachers.
The comments that people provided had a certain tinge of concern about the one laptop per child project, and one of them said, quote, with no apparent HCI input, and there is an opportunity if those involved to participate in developing not just the interface and not just the hardware, but the interface, but also the content. And I guess I'd like to add a nice word about my colleagues, Ben Beaters and Alison Druin, working on the International Children's Digital Library, which has put up 1,800 books in 38 languages, full text, full graphics for use around the world. And it is being deployed in a variety of developing nations. So I think that we have to think about more, and you've also dealt with cultural heritage and the kind of educational materials that I think are important to have. You want to add to that?
Yeah, just the one thing I'd want to say is on that list of real access criteria that were up, one of the big ones is local content.
Yeah.
Right now, if you can empower someone or some group of people to create content locally rather than it filtering from the developed world.
Right. No, they certainly understand that, and they've, elicited award-winning books from cultures around the world and are making them accessible in that form. And it also has a partnership with one laptop per child, so potentially that will become some content. I agree that it's not yet clear that that will be the helpful technology. I think it's also compelling, the mobile technologies and your descriptions of it, and that goes to some of the other questions there about the feedback. Could you identify a couple of the lessons learned from your study of mobile technologies that would have payoffs in other cultures?
Yeah.
You showed a few of them, right?
Okay, this is good. The one thing I'm going to say, which is probably quite controversial, is usability is irrelevant. Okay? You must understand that people who buy a cell phone, that's all they have for a lot of them. They don't have a house, they don't have a car, that's it. They have nothing else to do. So they will spend a long time figuring out how to use the phone, and they will do it. They're not worried about efficiency and effectiveness. If you can provide a solution that actually makes someone's life better, you don't need to do the usability. You can if you want, that would be nice. But that's not where the focus is. It's about understanding the community and the culture and developing applications and things that make, well, as Ben said at the start, that make people's lives better. And the usability comes after that. It's not so important.
Okay. There's an interesting set of questions here, which was probing your question of Hofstede's ratings of South African style or culture. And there was a question which says, well, that sounds very general. The questioner says very clearly, aren't there lots of cultures in South Africa? And throughout Africa, you've talked about Africa as a continent, but isn't it really hundreds of cultures for which the implied frustration of how does one design for 100 different cultures when they may have such profoundly different needs?
Yeah, so two things then, Hofstede. Sitting in a room in London, you read these tables and you go, looks good. Close the book, leave it behind. Now when you get to Africa, as Ben points out, in South Africa we have 11 different cultures, quite distinct, different languages. And for example, the Zulus are the people who don't have hierarchies, right? So Hofstede, to have a line for South Africa, is absolutely meaningless in my experience. So the other part of your question was...
I mean, Africa is not one place. It's 100 or more cultures with great diverse needs. So when the solutions you develop in one community, how much can they be generalized?
Not massively. So now my effort is, as I said, putting into methodologies so that other people can follow on. We can teach HCI a different way, but also in what we call communitization technologies. So the nurses that you saw with the cell phones, we've built a system now that lets doctors or nurses draw up questions that they want answered, hit deploy, and it gets put on a cell phone. And so rather than focus on these end users, now we're focusing on community level.
Okay, and I'm coming down to last question, which wraps around a variety of issues about learning and education. And one of the things you should understand, and Paula and Gary are heroes in South Africa in terms of creating a unity that we don't have in other places among the HCI group that has a shared curriculum and is working together, has meetings to develop and accelerate in how many universities in South Africa?
How many, Paula?
11 universities that are teaching the common curricula and promoting an HCI awareness. And it's quite appropriate that this will be down there. And it's tied in with the encouragement to come down there and the questions people are asking about how to get involved. Would it be helpful for someone interested in donating to come to South Africa and learn from the people? So, I mean, you mentioned this, but what are the other opportunities if people can't come to that event, February 2008, how they can visit professionally and how they can become involved?
We have a very good professional society in South Africa called SAICSIT, which runs conferences and has journals and all that good stuff. And people at those conferences also present a lot of the type of work. Any of you are welcome to come, he said, hesitating at several hundred people in the audience, but please contact me. I think maybe what's best for me to do is on the DIS website, add some links of things like SIGCHI and journals, and so if you go to the DIS 2008 website, you'll pick up the links there.
Right. I might say that SIGCHI conference has a high level of professional quality. They're published in the ACM Digital Library. They're part of our community. We should know more about them. I'm pleased that Gary's been able to bring us and tell us the stories of those communities. It makes me feel richer, makes me feel better to know about the work that he's doing, and I hope you'll join in helping Gary and helping many other people make the world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
All right. Great, that was great. Yeah, great.
You're getting a very...
Wonderful. All right, then I have just the transition comments here. Just a reminder, the organizers would like to steer you that